Welcome everyone to this webinar, a collaboration and partnership between Unification Theological Seminary, UTS, and the Universal Peace Federation, UPF. I'm Thomas Walsh, Chairman of UPF International and your moderator for this webinar today on an exciting and important topic, the significance of religious freedom for peace and human development. Recently, UPF hosted a World Summit in Korea about prospects for reunification of the Korean Peninsula, and a number of speakers brought out the point of religious freedom as a critical indicator in a way of nations that contribute to peace in significant ways. So I think our topic of religious freedom is not only about individual rights, but its impact and significance for building a world of universal and lasting peace, and to contribute to human development. So we'll be touching on a variety of topics with our keynote speaker, Dr. Jan Figel. Before I introduce him, however, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Thomas Ward. He is the president of UTS and on the faculty with specialization in the area of peace studies. He is formerly an emeritus dean at the University of Bridgeport, where he built up a peace studies curriculum that was of a very high order. So UTS, and I'm an alumni, I'm very proud that he can bring those talents to UTS. Dr. Ward, thank you for being with us today and offering some opening comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walsh, for organizing today's event, and many thanks to our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Jan Figel, and also to our distinguished participants, Professor Lay, and likewise Kayleigh Muffet and John Kester. We really appreciate your collaboration. Unification Theological Seminary, as a graduate theological seminary, co-founded by Dr. Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, is very cognizant of the importance of religious freedom. And as an organization which has gone through our own struggles with the matter of religious freedom, we recognize that it's something that has to be protected and something which has to constantly be valued. Religion plays such a fundamental role in our societies, and to have the opportunity to protect that role is essential and is something which governments are called upon, particularly liberal democracies, to protect at all costs. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to hear today from our distinguished speaker and from all of our commentators. And I thank you, Dr. Walsh, for organizing today's program. I look forward to it very much. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, for your leadership of UTS, and it's always a pleasure to collaborate. And I particularly enjoy that you always have very bright and stimulating students to join our program. It's now my privilege to introduce our main speaker, none other than Dr. Jan Figel. Dr. Figel, you and I have known each other for a while now, but in this public setting, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Does it go Figel or Figel, or help me out here just a moment?
As you wish. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. Dr. Figel is a Slovakian politician who served in the parliament, heavily involved in Slovakian and European affairs. He left the parliament in 1998 and served in the Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and was leading in the discussions of Slovakia's accession negotiations with the European Union. In 2009, he was elected as leader of the Christian Democratic Movement in Slovakia, and from 2012 to 2016, Vice President of the National Council of the Slovak Republic. Dr. Jan Figel served the European Commission under His Excellency President Prodi and then His Excellency President Barroso from 2004 to 2009. In 2016, he was appointed by European Commission President Claude Juncker as Special Envoy for the promotion of freedom of religion outside the EU. So, Dr. Figel, we're really delighted to have you featured. You have a great background and knowledge. I was fortunate to participate in a program of UPF together with the Aulika Foundation in Bethlehem, and heard your interventions on the importance of religious freedom, which were quite articulate and very well stated. So we're delighted you're with us today. Dr. Figel, you've been a strong advocate for religious freedom throughout your career. Could you take some time for our audience to say a bit about your background, circumstance, something of your journey that led you to your interest and your advocacy for religious freedom? You know, I might point out you grew up in what was called Czechoslovakia, and it was under the USSR dominion, and so it's quite an interesting history. And now you're poised in a country very much impacted by what's going on in the Ukraine. But we'd like to hear a little bit about your own journey.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, dear President Ward, dear friend Thomas Walsh, and their students, I'm glad that we can communicate, and I'm convinced that we can even do something for more humane 21st century, and that's our role, that's our shared responsibility and privilege. Figel in English or Figel in German means not only my name, but an identity which is so important to me, to my family. But on the other side, what I want to stress, this should lead us into awareness that we are all different, but fortunately we are all equal in dignity, and we belong to one family, one humanity. And this awareness and this shared responsibility should deliver what I mentioned at the beginning, more humane 21st century. I am one of 5 kids, and I have my 4 kids and grandchildren as well, so I enjoy life. On the other side, my name, Jan Figel, before belonged to my young uncle, who was killed by Stalinist secret services in then Czechoslovakia. And we don't know, we never knew where he was buried and what exactly happened that night when he disappeared in 1953. So for me, for my brothers, for my father and family, this was always the issue: freedom of conviction, freedom in society, freedom to believe and to live according faith and conviction. This was a tragic problem in Central Eastern Europe for 40 years. Now I can say half of my life, I lived under totalitarian system. And fortunately, half of life I live in freedom with responsibility. So I can compare, and not only compare, but also help the others to achieve freedom, to live in dignity. And I think that's very important, because some paid the highest price and didn't come to this privilege. We didn't pay that much. Of course, we struggled. We invested into this freedom we enjoy now, but it's not over. And freedom is never self-evident, automatic. Look now, yes, Thomas, you mentioned Ukraine, which desired to be part of free and common Europe. And since 2013-14, they suffer, and now they suffer tragic invasion and aggression and war. So once again, peace is not automatic. Freedom as well. It's a fruit of justice, fruit of values which are protected and promoted in society and in international relations. And shortly to add, when I was dealing with freedom of religion or belief, as we say here in Europe or in international relations for freedom of religion or belief, I came to the point that this is the deepest expression of personal freedom, because it's actually freedom of conviction, freedom of conscience, and freedom to believe or not to believe or change. And this dignity of human person, which is so intrinsically connected to religious freedom, is source of our inviolable and undeniable rights and duties. Unfortunately, in our decades, in our generations, we tend to forget duties, obligations, and enjoy and ask, demand more and more rights. But I want to remind that without balance between rights and duties, without responsibility, we will lose even rights, because they are undefendable, or they are not sustainable without the side of duties.
Yeah.
And fourth, to conclude, is a very serious matter. I can say, and we can go into some cases, it's a question of life and death in the world. Many people pay the highest price for their conviction, or simply they are liquidated because of their conviction.
Yeah, FORB, just to emphasize, freedom of religion and belief as an acronym. I appreciate very much, as I have previously in your presentations, of bringing in not only the human rights dimension of freedom of religion, and it's being in many ways the foundational human right of conscience and belief, but also bringing in this importance of duties, and that even the very concept of human dignity derives in many ways from a spiritual foundation. You've pointed that out on previous occasions. So it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about this idea of dignity, the culture of dignity, as it applies to freedom of religion.
I must say that as European Union first Slovak commissioner dealing with education and culture, youth, civil society, and then it was 2004-2009 period, but then as the first ever EU special envoy for freedom of religion or belief outside the Union for the external dimension, it was 2016 and 19 period, I came to the point, even to the knowledge that human dignity should and can serve as a common base, a platform for different cultures, and even one could say civilizations, not only for dialogue, but for coexistence in peace and shared responsibility. Because there are different but very similar ways towards understanding of dignity in Judeo-Christian culture or faith and tradition, biblical tradition, one could say, or one can say karama in Arabic, in Islamic tradition and teaching. Dignity is very frequently cited in international law and constitutions, especially since Second World War, The first country which introduced dignity in the constitution was Ireland in 1937, but then after tragic Second World War, many, either international covenants or constitutions, including India or Germany, speak very clearly about dignity. So why I mention it? Because I came to this point when I visited different countries and I was dealing with political prisoners or religious prisoners in Cuba or Iran or Sudan, Pakistan, that either we succeed in understanding that there is something common and we will prevail with common understanding, or then divisions would take over, and divisions means sooner or later sort of conflicts and even atrocities. So in 2015, I called for some action against genocidal killings in the Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, which was already very visible persecution and mass atrocities. Some people said it's not a genocide, but I believe that it is already something what can be described as genocide. And then I wrote a lot of letters to leaders in Europe to speak about genocide and our commitment or duty, again, obligation to act against. There are 3 P's important in this genocide convention from 1948. To protect victims, to prevent genocide, to protect victims, and to punish perpetrators. So I can say we generally in the world, we failed again in preventing, in protecting, and in punishing. And therefore, we can say that the last century, since Armenian genocide, was full of several bloody genocides. And in spite of never again, the reality was again and again and again. And we need to stop, and we need to revert for more humane time, not business as usual, but century of more hope. So this was my conviction. This is my conviction. I was then invited to deal with it as first ever EU Special Envoy. After my entry into the field of international organizations and cooperation, several countries followed the same line or decisions as US before. So there is special envoy or ambassador or plenipotentiary in Denmark, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Germany, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, many since 2016 especially. There were 2 ministerials in Washington, DC, and now we have even international religious freedom and belief alliance with more than 30 countries. I am a member of the International Council of Experts. So I would like to underline again, quest for religious freedom and human dignity for all is a must, and we may bring better century. Of course, war at Ukraine is even stronger appeal to follow this line.
Yeah, so you identify a number of developments that are very encouraging and indicate a growing awareness of the importance of religious freedom, and it's enshrined in many constitutions and important documents, most notably the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18 in particular. And yet we also see trends that are, so to speak, rolling back on some accomplishments, some concerned about the rise of autocratic systems of governance, democracy, and new forms that are more authoritarian in nature. In fact, even a problem of religions that themselves do not affirm or apply principles of religious freedom to others, especially minority religions where they appear. So I like your thoughts on some of the threats to religious freedom that are currently at play.
Yeah, some people say, and this is a really quite frequent accusation, that we have problems because there are religions and there are many religions and different religions. And sort of conclusion is, without religion, we would be better off, which is wrong, which is even anti-human, because religion belongs to history and to humanity from the early beginning. Not religion is a problem, but human evil, not religion per se. And especially when we mention religion, it is the abuse of religion by, for example, extreme violence, by terrorism, which represents quest for power, political or state power, but it's not religion which poses the problem or danger. Interpretation of religion may be a problem because actually very frequently it is the interest of interpreters what is the outcome of teaching or practice, and then we see a lot of hate speech or incitement to violence. I want to say, Dr. Walsh, that those who do not understand the religion, and especially abuse of religion, cannot understand what is going on in the world today. And if we don't understand what is going on, how can we help? How can we heal? So it is very important to understand religions and to learn about, to know what is the true concrete religion and what is misinterpretation. Religious literacy is needed in media, for journalists, for diplomats, for business people. We often use, and everybody has one or even more, smartphones. Technology is important, but we need smart people with smartphones.
Yes.
Because smart people can make a difference,
Yes.
not smartphones. You know, smartphones can be abused, misused for whatever violence means. Look, according Pew Research Center in Washington, 84% of global population claim its religious affiliation. So it's not a half majority, it's overwhelming majority. And the trend is growing. So we cannot say that religion is a problem, because then population is a problem. Mankind is a problem, which is, you know, not an acceptable message, but it's important also to remember that kind of other extreme is also something very special. The most bloody dictators of the 20th century were atheist and secularist dictators. Hitler, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Pol Pot. So that's why, again, human dignity must be a departure point of our public policy. It must be the objective of the public policy, and it must be a criterion for measures and policies. The beginning, the end, and also the road. Human dignity for all, not for majority, not for some. Human dignity of all and for all. Maybe one important point for all of us is that the human person has dimensions. It's not only physical, it's not only intellectual, but also spiritual. And one person represents homo rationalis, homo moralis, and homo religiosus. which means when we speak about freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion, we speak about one person, because everybody needs to nurture, to use its intellect, its conscience for morality, and also its spiritual dimension. Why, and I conclude here, why war or persecution, or in general evil, which is like hatred or violence, is so frequent and so strong in our times and in our world. I think that there was always some evil, but it is successful because it's allies. Evil has many allies, frequent, cheap, but efficient. And the major allies of evil are indifference, ignorance, and fear. They are siblings. They are usually around together. Indifference when we don't care. It's far away. It's not us.
Yeah.
Ignorance if we don't know, if we don't understand. And fear when we are scared to say something, to do something. And our antidote, and I conclude here, against these allies of evil should be allies of common good. Education, congratulations, to study and to teach good things. Education, engagement, and courage. Don't be passive. Learn how to live better and for a better world, and be courageous to do something, to say something, to stand up.
Well, that's a very good way to draw to close this opening conversation. I particularly applaud your reference to what we might call developing religious literacy, that it's any educated person or person involved, whether in international relations or political affairs, must understand the dynamics and importance and significance of religion in the lives of billions and billions of people throughout the world. So a point extremely well taken. And I like your more holistic understanding of the person as having the moral and the rational and the spiritual dimensions. They're not separated into different persons, and the same applies to society. It is political, it's economic, it's social, and it has this deep core in the realm of meaning that is most often expressed through religion. So very stimulating opening discussion. I want to turn to our commentators. We have three waiting, and we have a growing list of questions for you. So I want to move right along and invite Professor William Ley, who's on the faculty of UTS. He's an attorney. He developed and served as the head of the Criminal Justice Department at the University of Bridgeport. He's a colleague and friend, serves on the board of Universal Peace Federation. Professor Ley, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh, and thank you, Dr. Figel. So good to be meeting you this morning and to be hearing from you. And I am also encouraged to think of you and in your work as an envoy, outside of Slovakia, outside of Europe. I mean, you mentioned a few key countries: Cuba, Iran, Sudan, Pakistan. I mean, it is very encouraging to think that countries and the European Union itself are seeing, the monitoring or the encouragement of religious freedom worldwide as something that really has to be looked at and really has to be encouraged. And also, I also like your phrase, religious literacy. I concur 100%. You cannot understand phenomena, whether we're talking about the disturbance in, the war in Ukraine or any other sort of phenomena, if we don't understand the religious aspect behind it. I'd like to draw your attention to a particularly American phenomenon and get a few comments from you on it. Religious freedom in the U.S. is enshrined in the First Amendment, and we have the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause. And the Establishment Clause bars the government from oftentimes taking religious positions and you know, this is interpreted by our Supreme Court, and it runs a wide range of things. But in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there isn't an establishment clause. And I'd kind of like to get your thoughts on this. I mean, there are various countries where there are state religions, there are official religions, there are Islamic republics, and yet they provide for free exercise. I mean, would you say that as long as there's free exercise, you know, barring an establishment is less important, and states should be free to be able to base themselves on specific religious principles?
Look, the world from this point of view is really a mosaic. To be more concrete, United Nations rapporteur for Forbes some years ago prepared a kind of overview or report on religious freedom and character of state. Basically, or roughly, we can say that like 5% of states in the world are anti-religious. Over 50, I think it was like 55% are secular, and the rest, the 40, are religious, as you called it, Islamic republics, somehow related to religion. But the important message is, when we look to different surveys, annual reports, the biggest problems with either persecution or discrimination or even intolerance is in anti-religious and religious countries. So what I want to say that the secular state, if it is secular, fairly secular, not falsely, and I will explain, fair secular state is a blessing for religious freedom for all, not only majority or some, but for all. But fair secular state means built on secularity, which brings plurality or pluralism in society, into society, and dwells on equal citizenship, which is a principle. And again, I said before that equal dignity is something what defines me and you, and whether we are from royal background or homeless family, we are equal in dignity. And this moral principle should be translated through state, and I say fair secular state translates in this moral ethical principle into equal citizenship, equal protection for all in front of law. And I think we need to follow this line, follow this ideal or relation, balance. False secular state or false secularism actually means replacing religious freedom and religious plurality by ideology of secularism. And it is a very dangerous trend in several countries today from various reasons, autocratic tendencies or fight against the so-called separatism or extremism. And then actually ideology takes over state and society. So I would recommend, and of course I am part of the situation, to learn from the best, to follow this important principle of equal citizenship for all, to nurture plurality, because it is enrichment for society. United States is interesting example because it was built on the quest for religious freedom. But in recent time, we see more and more reasons for either concerns or misunderstandings, difficult situations. You know them better than me. And somehow we need to get back to the principles, to the roots, to the important points which defined the space for all, equality for all. So basically, this is my answer.
Oh, well, thank you for that good, stimulating question, Professor Lay, and your response, Dr. Figel. I think it brought out some points that I've heard you articulate previously about. Sometimes you use the term respectful pluralism, for example, or fair-minded secularism, as opposed to the unfair or the disrespectful. So I think these are helpful conceptualizations. I want to move on, though, keep going. And next, I'd like to bring forward, we have two graduate students at UTS involved in the Peace Studies program. And I'd like to first welcome Ms. Kayleigh Moffett, who also thankfully is leading UPF USA to a very strong profile, not only in the United States, but globally. So Mrs. Kayleigh Moffett, please.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh, and greetings, Dr. Figel. You had a lot of really fantastic catchphrases. I just want to comment on that. I wrote down many of your phrases because I'm impressed with your ability to make things so clear and simple on a topic that I feel like my generation in the United States is not so keen on discussing and embracing. And to your point where you were talking about what's happening in the United States, that's one of the topics that came up for me, is that, you know, in my generation's effort to embrace human rights in general, the more secular human rights, we have also started to kind of hide away or put in a corner the religious side of human rights and dignity. And it's kind of a heartbreaking phenomenon that those who have, you know, religious, if you're leaning into a religious direction, you don't actually feel so confident to be able to lead with that and embrace that as part of your human dignity. And so what I would ask of you is, I'm also thinking about the global landscape, and you were talking about the different, you know, governments that don't embrace this ideal. I love the idea that, you know, religious freedom should be inherent in all of our policy, that it should be, you know, the focus and the objective. But I see, you know, many governments who have completely cut off from that. For instance, I study a lot about North Korea and what's happening there, and several other governments that don't embrace religious freedom, maybe in name embrace religious freedom, but in practice really don't recognize what you're talking about as that being part of the core human dignity. So I would ask you how, if you have some ideas, how could we educate people, or how can we shift the, you know, the cultural experience of people to start to embrace religion and spirituality as part of this human dignity and identity? Because it can seem hopeless sometimes, honestly, but I'm curious how we could get there in situations where it's not natural or hasn't already been built up over time.
Yeah, young people, Kayleigh should never be hopeless, because you represent hope. You are future. And therefore it's important what we do for and with young people, because it's investment into future. I was educational commissioner for European Union, and once I remember nice exchange of priorities or conviction, because then Tony Blair published his message in British media that he has 3 priorities for Britain. And they were education, education, education. Very good, very nice. And I responded as commissioner then that it reminds me what we have learned a lot and quoted daily from Lenin. Uchitsa, uchitsa, uchitsa. Lenin, I mean, founder of the Soviet Union. So I agree education for future is important, but we have to distinguish or differentiate what we learn from, or from whom we learn, what and from whom. And religion is important part of our knowledge. If we don't understand religion, how can we understand a human history or even realities of this world now? The most advanced societies, and you mentioned Korea, so I will use Korea as example. You can compare Korea in the 50s, one war, one peninsula, one difficult post-war situation, and then division, and then two different roads. And where is the nightmare today on the north, and a quite strong, competitive, free society on the south, which is not ideal, but Korea, South Korea invest in my country, which was never the case before, but now they are strong enough to run globally. And this is also a result of religious freedom, because religious freedom has impact on security and on economy or economic capability, competitiveness of society. And to answer your question, maybe more principally, because this is example, and examples are pooling. Words are calling, but examples are pooling. So use examples towards your parents or brothers, sisters. But what I want to say in principle terms, human capacity or humanity is driven especially by two motors. One is called reason, and the other is called faith. Or in general, religion and science. When these two dynamic forces are working in one direction, society is very dynamic and prosperous. And what is the direction? What is the objective? Truth and justice for all, which means actually common good, because truth and justice is a base for common good. And if these two powers in society are working against, as we had it in Stalinist Eastern Europe, we see decline and clashes and problems and wars.
Right.
We see it also now in Ukraine. This is clash which is so damaging, so tragic. So once again, use these two forces. Some people dwell more on reason, some more on faith, as important drivers towards a better future. And I think you have quite many examples also in the United States.
Thank you, Kayla, for a wonderful question, and Dr. Figel. But moving to our next graduate student, I'd like to invite Mr. John Kester to offer a question to Dr. Figel.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Walsh, and thank you very much, Dr. Figel, for speaking to us on this topic. I took many notes that I feel I can use in my future studies. One point that really resonated with me is how religious freedom is the deepest freedom of them all, because it is the source of identity. It highlights our right to decide for ourselves, and it embodies our ability to express ourselves. I'm really inspired by your conviction to religious freedom, how living under a totalitarian society has led you to your commitment and to greater access to freedoms worldwide. I appreciate how you highlighted the siblings of indifference, evil, and fear as allies of evil. I think this is really crucial to our recognition of these elements early on as potential symptoms that will lead to conflicts developing later on. I think fear and indifference are sometimes regarded as normal or unimportant to address, simply normal types of behavior. I find it fascinating the effect religious freedom has on society as a whole. It fosters respect, it fosters toleration of diversity. And this is really important for minorities because it creates respect for them and as they become often victimized. The acceptance of religious freedom also encourages broader freedoms. It provides a balance of government overreach, it's a powerful force against the spread of communism, which I think you can attest to from your work in Slovakia and elsewhere. I really appreciate how you mentioned as well the dimensions of duties. Indeed, freedom comes with a responsibility to society. One question I had for you was, how has the coronavirus crisis exacerbated the problem of the oppression of religious freedom, or how has it revealed it to further to us? What has changed? What opportunities do you see now present?
Coronavirus is a global issue, and I think that it revealed a lot about us, how weak we are, or even being so advanced in technologies, in security, we are vulnerable, very vulnerable, including America. Secondly, it revealed very strong interdependency. There are no real borders for Corona, and we need to work on this interdependency towards future, towards medications, towards some rules and responsibilities. I wanted to add what you said, or quoted after what I said, and also your previous colleagues, I think including Professor a bit. America is, United States is a country of freedom, and it is very important. But on the other side, I would recommend to speak more about certain conditions of freedom, or what I want to say, freedom and responsibility. This is sustainable way ahead. Without responsibility, freedom cease to exist, and that's something what should be learned. Should be learned by leaders, by society, and we should also cultivate in the new generations this understanding of duties, because freedoms without duties, it's a sign of irresponsibility, immaturity. Second message is that freedom is a beautiful daughter of a very wise mother called truth. Without truth, we are lost. Truth liberates, not freedom per se. We need to know truth, to accept truth, to stick to the truth in order to stay free.
Right.
And this should be nurtured in society, in leadership, in education, because sooner or later we will go to a blind road or somewhere else if we forget these principles. And then one more, also from COVID, that we are interdependent, and actually we should know that we are brothers and sisters in one humanity. And if this is missing, if brotherhood behavior is missing, actually solidarity is missing. One of the deepest human capability to love each other. What makes us different is then a problem or missing. So brotherhood, sisterhood is a road to peace. Is something what helps us to live in peace, which has enormous price. This lecture or exchange is about integral human development. So of course, integral means medical, economic, social, but also intellectual, but also spiritual. Because without these dimensions, and I said also spiritual as sort of last but not least, we can speak about integral human development. And this integral human development is tested today from different angles, medical angle, or now economic. There will be a lot of impact from Ukrainian war on hunger in the world. And we have to understand we are all together in one human family. And I hope that those who understand all these messages and principles will help to overcome current very tragic and difficult test of humanity.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Figel. Thank you, John. That's a great question and great commentary on a number of the essential points of the presentation. Thank you. I want to move to, we have about 10 minutes and we have some very good questions. So Dr. Figel, I ask you to err on the side of brevity, but I would like to cover as many as possible in the next 10 minutes. And there's about 6 of them. One comes from Dr. Andrew Wilson. He's on the faculty at UTS, and he points out that Mr. Putin claims to be a good Russian Orthodox adherent, but some argue that his religious views informed his decision to engage in the current military incursion in Ukraine. Can you comment on this point? In 1 minute.
1 minute. Look, my friend, we are all sinners. Nobody's perfect, but beware of hypocrites. And Mr. Putin, in that sense, what you describe is a hypocrite, because he cannot speak with open heart and mind about one nation and kill brothers and sisters of this nation. He is son of Cain in this behavior. I'm sorry for that, but that's the problem of Mr. Putin, to cross himself and to kill brothers and sisters in Ukraine.
We have a question also from Dr. Tajuddin Hamad. Does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights need to be updated? For example, with greater input from representatives of the developing countries of the world community. Any thoughts on that?
I think that in 1948, we achieved quite a strong sense of importance of morality and politics and in politics. And especially the Article 1 speaks with clear prudential terms about our not only rights and equality, but also duty to behave to one another in the spirit of brotherhood. It's not a religious talk, but how much brotherhood do you see in Africa, in the Middle East, elsewhere? When we achieve fulfillment of these words, then we can dream about next stage. But I think that we are falling behind and deep behind the level of the UDHR, unfortunately, regrettably.
Our next question asks you about your experience with the Christian democratic movement in Europe, referring to your introduction and bio and involvement, and any reflections on the current state of Christian democratic movement.
After Second World War, this was one of the decisive political streams in Europe, and for us in Central Eastern, this was more about the inspiration for dissent, for future, or for the fight for freedom. In the West, it consolidated countries after Second World War and brought especially 3 dimensions in politics, which are visible, and it's a legacy of Christian Democrats. First was understanding of human rights and human dignity, which got into various constitutions and European Convention on Human Rights, for example. And there is a unique court, Continental Court for Human Rights in Europe, in Strasbourg. So this is one pillar of this legacy. The second one was and is social market economy, which means economy competitive, strong in private hands, but also responsible for societal development, for cohesion and solidarity in society. And the third pillar of Christian democratic legacy was and is European reconciliation and integration. And in this sense, in this orientation, I think Christian Democrats have a role to play also today in Europe. But they must be loyal to the principles and values which define them.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Jorge, for that question. Our next question is from Margaret Barron. Today's schools in many countries focus on knowledge and discipline, and she proposes we need to educate, I think echoing your comment, on human dignity, which has been fostered more through religion. Wonder your thoughts on that. I think echoing some of the points you've made already.
Yeah. I have a bit more years behind than some of your students, which helped me to remember or to compare. We had very popular times of information society. Then next stage was knowledge society. I don't want to speak about the next abbreviations, but what is important in these stages or comparisons or quest for more is wisdom, wise society, where knowledge, mathematics, science, technology, history, etc., combines all these facts and news with important human principles, starting with dignity. If we disregard dignity, we wasted our time of education. And Soviets have been first up in the cosmos because they invested heavily into science, into mathematics, which is okay, but worked or decided the policies against dignity of some or many. And this is against humanity. So please dream or think about knowledge with principles and values. And if I have time at the end, I will say which two principles are decisive for future of yours and mine and ours.
I have two more questions. The first from Sophia Augustina. How do we foster literacy in religion? In other words, greater understanding, awareness of the religions of the world and their impact on society. How do we take advantage of modern technology to do so?
Oh, technology helps to see in medias res or immediately online, what's going on in the Middle East, in Ukraine and elsewhere. It helps us to lead dialogue, which is global. But what is important is our quest for wisdom, to understand that the best way how to learn about the other is to offer a dialogue. 1 + 1 is more than 2. In mathematics, it's 2, but in dialogue, it's more than 2 because it brings common understanding. It brings synergy. It means even maybe marriage. So it's more than 2. We are enriched by dialogue. So culture of dialogue is important in this point. There are many religions. There are the diversity is something what defines us, and by many it is seen as a problem. Identity is never a problem. Identity is my departure point. It's me. I am unique, and it doesn't mean more than anybody else. But if my person is not fulfilled, if it is not, active in life, in its responsibility, in its opportunities, in its worldview, nobody else can replace it. This is my originality. And therefore I mention it because for many, identity is more than everything else. Identity is invitation to know the other because only in relation to the other, I know who I am. why I am different, but only in relation to anybody else I can be happy. And everybody wants to be happy. Pursuit of happiness is in the Declaration of the United States. So I wish you to be happy, but remember that happiness requires relation to other person. And therefore, everybody needs somebody. So this is additional reason to know the others, including other religions, because that's reality, that's identity. And we are richer when we understand, when we know.
One last question comes from Andrea Higashibaba, and she's talking about China, which arguably is a kind of an anomaly. She says that China has experienced dramatic economic progress, at the same time absence of religious freedom and freedom of speech.
Yeah, look, I will connect it with the previous question, because technology helps us, and technology helps China to go to cosmos, to the space. Technology helps China to produce maybe new types of viruses. They can be seen under microscope. Once again, technology overcomes all distances, whether we speak about hundreds of thousands of miles or nanometers, subatomic structures. But technology doesn't provide any human closeness. Human closeness is provided by heart, by spirit, by understanding that we are interdependent, we are brothers and sisters, and we share responsibility. And therefore, something more than numbers and structures and powers is important for future of China. I was very happy when I visited China and spoke at 4 universities. The young generation didn't quote, nobody quoted Mao Zedong, their leader of recent past, but they quoted a lot Confucian. And when I was young member of parliament, in my first speech, I quoted Confucian as well in Bratislava in Slovakia. So for me, this was like, wow, discovery that new China, future China is closer to Confucian and closer to my thinking than I expected after decades of brainwashing. And I remember what I said in my parliament when I started. I was like 32 years old. Confucius said that when words lose their meaning, our freedom is under threat. So it's important for freedom to keep the content of words, what family means, what law means, man and woman. If we lose the content, we lose understanding and we lose orientation and we lose freedom. Be sure, my friends. So this is a message from China. I hope they will keep on in this Confucian understanding of humanity and the future rather than communism or Maoist.
Well, thank you. And we're coming to a close. I want to give each of our commentators a chance to just in 40 seconds, just say a final comment. I'll start with Professor Lay. Dr. Ward, I don't know if you're able to just jump back in for a 1-minute closing remark. That would be welcome. But Professor Lay.
Well, thank you once again, Dr. Figel, and also all the other commenters and questioners. I do think we unearthed a lot of topics in this area of religious freedom and the role of religion. I recall our original topic was peace and human development, and I think we addressed it in a lot of different ways. So I appreciate it very much. And as someone who gets absorbed in American affairs, I really appreciate getting a European perspective and a really international perspective. So thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, Professor Lay. Ms. Moffat?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the things I'm walking away from this session is a little more language in my toolbox about how to approach this topic in a way that is engaging and feels broad and not from a limited scope. So I'm very grateful for that. I feel more empowered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Custer.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate how succinct and wise your answers have been. I'm definitely walking as well with a much more clear understanding of how religious freedom can contribute to development, peace worldwide. And I was really looking forward to this session because of your European perspective. I originate from Europe. So yes, your perspective has been really wise and informative. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Dr. Ward?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Figel, for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Walsh, for your inspiration for suggesting that we have this session today. Professor Lay, as always, many thanks for your insightful comments and observations. They resonated, I felt, very much with the theme today and with what Dr. Figel and Dr. Walsh had shared with us. Kayleigh and Muffet and John Kester, thank you for your insightful comments. We're so lucky to have you at UTS. We really appreciate what you shared with us today. You know, the one thing that struck me most, Dr. Figel, about your presentation was that you were able to navigate, I think, a fine line between the legal and philosophical parameters of this topic. And at the same time, I think your own personal life. I think that you have a certain kind of experience of the importance of religiosity through whatever has happened in your life. And I'm sure that that's part of what steers you and guides you to make the kinds of amazing comments, which are not normal, I think, for even a discussion on religious freedom, because you're able to combine these two dimensions, I think. All of the philosophical foundations and the legal instruments related to the question, but at the same time, you have this deeper context and framework and prism, I think, of a life of faith, which also guides and informs this. So I thank you very much. It's a testimony to the kind of life you've led, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ward. And Dr. Figel, I want to give you the last word.
Oh, yeah. Thank you all. Thank you, President and Chairman, for organizing this exchange. It's also for me revealing and encouraging and enriching. What I wanted to share with you, and maybe I will write 2 links for your further either study or maybe cooperation, especially on one will be my contact and one will be on Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity, which I helped to initiate time ago. This is the declaration, which is relatively short, 10 points. Why dignity matters and how religious humanists and secular humanists should come together. And the meeting point is called human dignity. If we are humanists, we should meet there and not only meet, but understand each other and work for human dignity for all. And this declaration is open document since 2018, invitation for all, whether they are scholars or students, to sign and join effort to promote what I would like to call, and this is also example, culture of human dignity. This is a nice book with many different great pictures from all over the world and citations, quotations from different authorities, personalities in 100 words, what human dignity means for them. Rabbi Sachs from New York is the first one. I must underline that really this term is something like a common root, the deepest root in our different understanding of humanity and history. And we should dig deeper. We should nurture this culture of human dignity. And these 2 principles I already signaled are important for living together in peace and in quest of integral human dignity. Very simple, or the most simple principles, but the most important for our relations. The silver one and the golden one. Don't do the others what you don't want the others to do unto you. It's reciprocal, it's just, it's fair. And what makes us more human than the silver one is the golden principle. Do unto others what you want others to do unto you. And when we combine these two principles in practical daily issues, we nurture culture of human dignity for all. So I wish you so. I will send you links to work on this or cooperate on this together. And I am looking forward to our future opportunities. All the best to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Figel, Dr. Ward, Dr. Lay, Ms. Moffat, and Mr. Kester, and thanks to Christina Miyage and Sunny Patterson and all those who helped put this together. Been a very, very stimulating and important program. I hope we'll have you back again in the future. Dr. Figel, maybe you can give some lectures at UTS one of these days, we hope. So with that, I think we will conclude and wish everyone the best. Thank you for a wonderful audience and all those that submitted very, very constructive and stimulating questions that drew out a lot of important additional insight from our keynote speaker. Thank you, everyone, and all the best.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jan. We'll stay in touch.
Figel.